Welcome to Big Homeopathy. I'm your host, Sarah Thompson. Hi, welcome to Big Homeopathy. I'm your host, Big Homeopath, Sarah Thompson. We just celebrated Mother's Day, and I wonder if Mother's Day should follow Midwives Day. Because before I can hold that creation in my arms, I have to go through the pain and the potential. And there are a lot of jobs that have to happen when a baby gets born, but there's one that only the mother can do, and that is to focus on bringing this thing into the world. In order for me to create, I have to let go of control. And so I hired midwives, and I had my babies at home in my farmhouse in Maine. And then I wanted to learn about how to bridge the gap between the fantasy of motherhood and the reality of motherhood. So I would sit at my keyboard with a nursing infant, and back in those days it was internet forums. I would go on these holistic mothering internet forums, and in that environment I learned about something called an unassisted home birth. And that's just exactly what it sounds like. It's when a mother chooses to have her babies and doesn't want any help. And that's amazing. But it made me feel really inadequate. I thought, is there something wrong with me that I want help? Am I missing some important right by choosing to have assistance at my side? There is an aspect of creation that always comes from a place where we're totally alone. But that doesn't mean that we have to be isolated completely as we bring it into the world. When I was first diagnosed with leukemia, I wanted to do it myself. I had this idea in general that whatever it was better to go it alone, and that was somehow noble. And even though I was afraid, of course, of the side effects of chemotherapy, I think that if I'm honest with myself, I will admit that there was an ego factor at play, that I wanted to prove that I could do it myself. But just like a mother has one job to do when she's having a baby, when you're very, very sick, the job you have to do is to get well. And I ended up needing a midwife for the treatment of a cancer that was moving faster than my body could keep up. And so I surrendered to that process, and I focused on my job, which was to believe wholly and fully that I could recover from the brutal treatment of chemotherapy and find my healing on the other side, and that my higher purpose was through this passage. The survival rates for the type of cancer that I had were about 40 to 45% from the first time, and then after I relapsed, maybe 50% after a bone marrow transplant. But those are statistics, and I'm not a statistic, and nobody is average, and we know that in homeopathy. There's only the individual. It doesn't matter whether it's 9% or 9%. But the one thing that I'm not is a survivor. That is the heart of the issue for me. When you go through a cancer diagnosis, people label you as a fighter, as a victim, and they put stickers on you, that say, fuck cancer and cancer sucks, often coming from people who've never had cancer. Because for me, in a very deep and important way, it didn't suck. I never said that. I would not go to war with a process that was happening in my own body. As soon as I'm fighting, I'm failing. And so when you go through cancer, people tend to want to co-opt you forever into this world of survivorship, where you remain a part of the cause and an advocate for pharmaceutical companies and the FDA, and you become a face of this industry. And with all of the gratitude and appreciation for the generosity that's behind that, hell no. I am not a survivor. I am a thriver. I've written a lot about survival versus thriving, and cancer is not an identity. Going through cancer treatment, that part is survival. But beyond that is when you get to health. Health is living, and life involves purpose. Finding your purpose is kind of a buzz phrase these days, and it's the sort of thing that makes me want to put on a hair shirt and go stand in Times Square and declare that the end is near. But there's a truth in it. It's just not a truth you go at intellectually. It's something that is revealed when you encounter your own personal koan that takes you out of the reality of suffering that you're living in and shifts your viewpoint. For me, that was homeopathy. It was like a koan in a bottle. And I became a homeopath because that's when you need a midwife. That was my call to service. The midwife into true healing. So, I'm a bit of a devotee of self-help, whether it's Byron Katie or Eckhart Tolle or Tim Ferriss or Jen Sincero. From the spiritual to the practical, I'm always consuming bright, shiny new resources. But that can be a trap. I have heard Jerry Seinfeld talk about your work in the world as the torture you can endure. I have heard Gillian Welch talk about writing as a process of going into her room until she got really miserable. I remember reading Douglas Adams talking about how many cups of tea and baths he had to take before he could get something down on the page. And that creative process can require a midwife. And so, for that aspect of my life, I hired a personal and professional coach. She's making me do all kinds of uncomfortable things that I don't want to do sometimes or that seem obvious. And there are moments when I question, what was my decision? Why am I paying someone to do these things? I could probably find all these resources for free in all my self-help. But I'm surrendering because I need a midwife. I need her for her presence and her patience, for her expertise and her support. I don't have to go it alone. And that is the process of growth, to know you don't have to go it alone. Surrendering to working with a midwife is a process of trust. And it's a process of choosing to be vulnerable during the most precious passages in my life. In my work as a professional homeopath, I can use homeopathy to help initiate that fluid process of development. But if you're my client, that healing belongs to you. That success belongs to you. My job is to hold in the highest light my promise, which is that I hear you, you can trust me, I can help you, and I believe in your healing. That's what's so big about homeopathy, and it's going to be huge. See you next week.